Have you ever looked for a way to evenly distribute records amongst your team? Maybe you're using Airtable for a CRM and you want to distribute leads, or you're using it for customer support and you want to be able to manage cases. In any of these scenarios, a really common way to do this is through round-robin assignment. And in the past, a lot of people recommended that you do this using scripting inside of Airtable, but we can actually do this really easily with Airtable automations and some formulas. Hi, I'm Dan Lehman from automationhelpers.com, and this video is part of our Airtable series. You can check out the full course using the link in the comments below. So our example today is going to be for a CRM where we have leads coming in from our website, and we want to make sure that they get assigned round-robin style to our sales reps. I've got two main tables here, one for my leads and then one for the sales reps. And on the leads table, there's a couple important things that we need. One is going to be the date of inquiry, or the date that this record is created. Now we could, if we want, create a field that's the actual Airtable creation timestamp, and we could use that. But presumably we might be using an outside form service. And so we're actually going to have this be a date field that presumably that form tool would be updating here. So here you can see we've got my date of inquiry. You can call this whatever you want, just creation date if you want. This is a date field, and I am including the time because presumably we might be getting lots of leads throughout the day, and we want to manage not just the date of who gets assigned which lead, but actually the time as well. So here I am displaying the time and the time zone for that. The other thing that I'm doing is I have a linked record field to our assigned sales rep. That's that secondary sales rep table that we have here. If I open up my settings, we can see that this links to the sales rep table, and I'm not allowing a link to multiple records. So we're not actually assigning this single lead that comes into multiple people. That's only assigned to one. We can see the inverse of that relationship here on the sales rep table, which we called it assigned leads, where now we can see the list of all the leads that they've been assigned. I did want to make mention for a second that some of you are going to want to use the actual assignee or the user functionality of this, and you totally can. So if you want that person to get an email notification and get the notification inside of the system, you can easily do this with the assignees, and it's not a problem to have that as well. So on our sales rep table, we could, if we want, have a user actually attached to the sales rep record. But even if you're using the users, I'd really recommend that you still have this table, because this is what's going to give us that additional functionality by adding these extra fields that we need as part of our automation process. So as you can see on our leads table, we have our date and our time here, and that information we want to be able to pull in because you can see every single one of these sales reps has multiple leads. So we want to be able to identify the most recent lead that they had assigned to them. We can actually now do this with two different fields, either a rollup or a lookup. Now, I'm going to recommend that we do it with a rollup because the rollup is going to be accessible inside of our automation. But just so you're aware, you can do this in the lookup as well. So let's take a look at both of these. So if we create a new lookup field, remember that a lookup field is essentially just a little portal into our linked table and pulling dates from that, pulling the field data that we want from that. So here we're saying for the lookup, we want this to come from our assigned leads. That's that linked field here. And from there, we want to attach it to our date of inquiry as the field that's actually going to show. And then what I'm doing is I'm sorting my records by that date from earliest to latest, and I'm limiting it to just a single record. What that's going to do is, if we didn't have this limit on here, it's going to have a comma-separated list of all the dates for our leads, but we only want it to show the most recent, which is why we added that sort and added this limit. Now, this is relatively newer functionality in Airtable, but that's what makes this so powerful that now inside of both our lookups and our rollups, we have the ability to sort and limit those number of items. So that here is going to give us our lookup functionality that's going to show us when is that most recent lead that was assigned to them. It's not going to worry about their previous leads. Now we can do the same thing here with the rollup field. We handle it just slightly differently, but really it's the idea that we want to roll up all of those leads that we have. So again, our same source is that assigned leads relationship. And then we're using that same date of inquiry here for the field that we want to roll up. The only real difference here is that we're just putting a max, and max is going to be essentially the greatest, the most recent date. So we're putting a max of values, and when we save that, you'll notice that we get the same exact result here. It's a little bit different in terms of how it's formatting that. We've got our time zone over here, but it's really the same underlying data. Now let's head in and create our automation. So we can click on the Automations tab here. You'll see we've already created one. Let's walk through the different steps. So the first thing that we need to do is create a trigger, and we're triggering this when a new lead record is created. Now, sometimes we're creating this from a form submission instead, so you might have a form submissions table that then creates the lead. That's really up to you. Now, I will say if you're using a forms tool that's not quite cutting it, or you've been using Airtable's forms and finding it a little bit limited, we really love fill-out forms, and we use them on about 80% of our projects. Fill-out's integrated really well with Airtable. You can make edits to records instead of just creating them in the first place. You can do things like scheduling and payments. If you want to check out Fill-out, we've got our affiliate link in the description below. In our automation, our trigger type is going to be when record is created, and this is going to go off of the leads table. So as soon as that lead record is created, now we're going to kick off this process. We do have a little bit of conditional logic here. We're saying if the assigned sales rep length is 0, that just means if we don't have an assigned sales rep, then we're good to go. Because if a sales rep was already assigned, then we don't need to go through this round robin process. And then we're also just checking to make sure that the date of inquiry is not empty, which we don't really need this to be able to run, but it's just a little helpful. Then the steps I need to do are to have a find records action. And so in this finding records, we're just going to pull back our sales reps. So to do this, we're going to have our sales reps table, and you could do this on a condition or a view. I'm going to do this based on a view because we don't really have any real logic that we need here, because we're pulling back all of the sales rep records. We're not just pulling back a subset of them. And so what I'm doing is I'm setting this to a view, and then I have this view as reps for assignment. Now we do have a little bit of sorting logic applied here. So on my sales reps table, I have this sorted by one field, and I've got it by my recent assignment, the lookup, or I could do the rollup of earliest to latest. So what that's doing is it's looking at this, and it's already going to find, hey, this top record is going to be the person who needs that assignment first if we're going round robin style, because we can see the person at the bottom got the most recent lead. Therefore, it's the person at the top who's going to get that lead assigned to them. Now, the reason I do it this way is because when we find those records, we're saying just return one individual sales rep. We don't want to return all of them. We just want to take the person who we want to assign this to. And so if we already have a view, we don't have to construct a lot of new business logic for this. The other reason for this is because in the find records step, there is no ability to actually sort the list within that one action. So what you'd need to do is add a secondary action, which lets us then sort the previous find records action. And I just find that to be overkill for this particular use case. So we really wouldn't need this sort list step here. Instead, as long as you have a view that's already sorted the right way and we're just returning that one record, then we can just use that find records action. And assuming we skip this sort list step, then the only other thing we need to do is update the record. Now here in updating the record, we're of course updating the leads table, and then we're plugging in our record ID from the original step. So we're updating the record that kicked this off in the first place. And we're saying, hey, our assigned sales rep, let me delete this out and I can just show you real quick. If we add this in, we need to take the record that we found in that find records step, and we're just going to take that as a list of our Airtable record ID, because this is going to be that one rep that was returned. Plug in that ID, and that's going to automatically link them to this new record. Now, if you're using the actual system users of Airtable, this is where you choose an additional field here, and this is where we have our assignee, and we could take our assignee, and instead of mapping this statically, we could map it dynamically, and then pull that value that we have from that records here so that we could update it with the actual assigned sales rep user if we need that functionality as well. So once we've turned our automation on, we can head to an interface where we have our different leads, and we can get started by testing this out. So let's click a button to add a new lead, and we're just doing this here for testing purposes because, again, remember, they would normally come in from our form. We could have any number of fields that we want, but here we're just going to put in a name, and we're going to plug in a date manually, which we wouldn't actually expect the user to do. But once we create that record, then that's going to have this Han Solo record, and you can see in just a fraction of a second, it identified that correct sales rep using that view of saying, here's the next person up, they're going to get assigned this. So let's test another one to make sure that we don't get Alex again, that it's cycling through the list the appropriate way. So let's add one, and we'll put in the date, and we'll create this. And then again, we're down here, and Jamie the negotiator, she's the next one up. And we'll do one more here. We'll create it. And then down here, we have the third person. So now you can see this gives us the ability to do that round robin assignment. Even if we have these quick firing, newly created leads that are coming in all at the same time, it's going to be able to identify who had the most recent leads, who hasn't had a lead for the longest time. Let's assign it to them and keep cycling through. We've done a ton of different Airtable CRM builds, so I'm going to link a couple of videos. One is to our Airtable automation system in the comments below if you want to see other things that we're doing with CRM functionality. If you have any questions about your own Airtable build, don't hesitate to reach out to our website at automationhelpers.com, where we're offering free 30-minute consultations.